The Rambam is speaking about the derech hayesharo, the straight and narrow path, that one should be on that straight and narrow path, not swaying to the right or to the left. And if you're on that path, you're able to maximize on your God-endowed gifts, your intellect, to be able to make an objective evaluation, what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, what you should pursue, what you should not pursue, what you should suppress. Haderach hayesharu mida beinonis. When we speak about the straight path, the straight and narrow path, it's the middle path. Shekvar shebchol deo v'deo mikol hadeo sheish lo adam. It's the midpoint regarding every predilection that a person has, the midpoint of every one of these predilections, which you explained before. We're born with many different predilections, attributes, characteristics, which cause us to gravitate and to be inclined to follow that direction. This is the Deo. This is the understanding, the predilection, which is equidistant from both extremes. It's not closer to one extreme more than the other. It's exactly in the middle. Therefore, he says, the earlier wise men, he's referring to King Solomon, says a person always has to evaluate his behavior. You always have to check it. You always have to do checks and balances. Evaluate where you at. As human beings, especially if a person has a certain ethical or moral compass within himself, we see things very often that irks us, because it's so antithetical to whatever we are. It really rattles us, and we're pained by it, and almost to a point we can't tolerate it. Okay, I was asked to come to a certain event the other night last week, and I didn't know if I wanted to go. Why? Because I was concerned that I would see certain behavior among those people, which would actually bother me very badly. People think because they have the means, they have the dollars, they have the success, they have a right to flaunt it, and they behave in a way which is inappropriate. Rather than being humble and understanding, what you have is a gift of God that you succeeded, yet they believe that somehow they have a certain right of empowerment because they own it. When I see this, I really doesn't sit well with me, and I prefer not to be exposed to it. But I went, and it turned out the people did behave themselves. Nobody flaunted what they had, and they gave it with purity, without ulterior motives, not to gain mileage on anything. They gave it purely for the cause of what was needed. This had to do with Israel, to help the Jews in Israel who are in need of many levels of support, whether it's food, whether it's housing, whether it's medical, whether it's clothing, whatever, maybe it doesn't make a difference. But again, if you see it right and you notice something, you get irked, you get thrown off. Very often when you get thrown off, sometimes you see it enough, there's an innate survival mechanism, every one of us, to survive. And that's the reason why a human being is able to acclimate himself over time. If you don't have an alternative, what do? There's an innate ability to acclimate yourself even to the worst situation. Why? Because that's the survival instinct which every one of us has. How do you survive otherwise? Because if you don't, you can't survive it. I always say, the Talmud tells us that if a person sins, even deliberately, if he does tshuva immediately, he repents, he's in a good place. But let's say he doesn't repent and he becomes a repeated offender, repeats the act which initially was a transgression, inappropriate. So the next time he does it the third time, he sees it as it's permitted. Now the question is why? Now, nobody's perfect. All of a sudden, we feel overwhelmed with desire and we cross the line. So we contribute, we're only human. Made a mistake. But if you made a mistake and understand we have certain vulnerabilities, why don't we make a correction? Should make a correction. So if you make the correction, it's fine. Because you have remorse that you're caught off guard. Or you were caught, or suddenly you were overwhelmed. We're not perfect. But after you realize that, and you don't take a precaution not to violate it again, how do you go back there? The answer is because you have an interest in that. But once you do that, then we talk about guilt. A person has difficulty living with guilt. So what does he do? Somehow he sees it through a lens. It's not so terrible. It's permitted. So once you become the repeated offender, automatically not to live with guilt and have difficulty living with your conscience, we somehow rationalize it, we justify it. And the more we do it, the more we somehow suppress that guilt, and eventually we feel no guilt, not even a trace of the guilt. And you attribute originally why you were opposed to crossing the line, that you were mistaken. Really, it was too fanatical. It was too extreme. But that's the innate instinct of a human being to survive. Otherwise, we couldn't survive. So if you're exposed to negative behavior long enough, eventually, because it's so painful to tolerate if you're on that straight and narrow path, what do? You start, for the sake of survival, you start seeing it through a lens. Maybe I'm too straight. Sometimes you're so straight, you're crooked. And therefore, as a result of that, you begin allowing yourself to see something positive about the negative behavior. You know, there's a Jew has an obligation to judge his fellow in a positive way. We have to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And you say, well, he's a Tinnik Shenishba. He doesn't have the background. It's true. That's good for the person. But if you allow yourself to be in an environment where nobody is actually behaving as an observant Jew, and that becomes your environment, and you keep saying, well, you can't fault them, but factually, you're only a human being. And if you're a human being and you're exposed and you see these people don't have those barriers which you have, it's like putting fuel on the fire. Because factually, everybody has some level of desire. We make choices. But if it becomes too overwhelming, automatically we justify making a different kind of choice, which is not the appropriate choice. But again, that's for the sake of survival, because you can't survive it otherwise as a human being. Either you have to remove yourself from the scene, or somehow, as he say, if you can't beat him, you join him. That's what he used to say. But that's the concept of you can't beat him, you join him. Because if you can't beat him, but factually, your inner being wants to go there, although intellectually, it's not right. See, there's a fight between the brain and the brawn, right? With the question, which one's out, brain or brawn? If the brawn is in place long enough, the brain accepts what the brawn wants. And therefore you gravitate towards the other way. So therefore, you have to continuously make an evaluation. Is my behavior where it should be? Am I really at the equidistant point? Am I off slightly? Because naturally, we would like to go in that direction. We're inclined to the physical. So every time you have to continuously make an evaluation, tweak the system to be back exactly in the middle. So you should be complete. Give you an example, as he gives an example. Person is very careful with his diet, and you always eat right. You're invited to go to a certain event, and the food there is outstanding, visually, taste-wise, quality-wise, and you overeat. Normally, you don't do it. So when you overate, you weren't really thinking, and even if you were thinking, you say, just this one time. But just this one time, factually, you enjoyed it. So you're touched by that. Once you're touched by that, you really have to pull back. Because if you don't pull back and you're touched by that, you're drawn after that. If you're drawn after that, You keep being drawn more after that. So that's what he says. You continually have to evaluate yourself. Where am I? Should I be there and it was just a one-time event and I have to get back to where I should be? Or no, that's okay to be there. So that's what Shlomo Melch says. You have to weigh and evaluate your behavior in every aspect, every sense of that word. Where are my predilections going? Where am I inclined? What am I inclined to? Maybe I'm tipping it too much. When they load a boat, they load it, which is equally weighted. Because if you weigh a boat down on one side, the slightest wave could tip the boat. Everything has to be balanced. As the boat has to be balanced, we have to be balanced. Because if you're not balanced, you capsize. And what's top is bottom, what's bottom is top. That's what happens. You see, what he's speaking about, he's not even speaking about within the spiritual realm, the Rambam. He's even speaking about behavior as a human being, eating, because he's speaking being sholem begufo. If you want to be physically whole, physically healthy, what physically healthy means even emotionally healthy. A person is into his ego. If you can't satisfy your ego because people don't acknowledge you sufficiently, you know what happens? You suffer. Here you want acknowledgement, nobody's acknowledging you. You become intolerant. It's painful. Person, whenever I go to a certain party, my peer group, everybody acknowledges me. It's like I don't exist there. It's painful to be there. You understand that wears you on you. Actually, it can actually compromise your health. But if you be in that equidistant point and you understand that it has no value, of course, in terms of what it is, it's only purely because you're inclined to that, it doesn't touch you negatively. See, speaking of sholem begufo, you complete physically, you're whole. Kate said, he gives an example. Lo ye bal chemo. You should not be a person who's easily angered. Person is like a tempest. You just have to touch him, he explodes. Noach lichos, easily angered. If it's not your way, you set off. Or lo kames she'ena margish ela beinani, or you literally like a corpse. You behave like so stoic, you have no feelings. A person could actually abuse you, you don't react. Has nothing to do with your humility. Just that is your nature. Ela beinani, though you should be in the middle of the road, meaning you should respond to what you should respond to, and you should not react to anything which you should not react to. So you're not stoic because certain things are unacceptable. And there are other things which it's not worth becoming upset because if you put in perspective, it's totally irrelevant. You should only become angry something that's worthwhile to get angry about. It's something of great importance. What's the reason? There are many things we have a right to get angry, but it should be something of exceptional great value. Why? Because if you get angry too often, even for the right thing, you're already conditioning yourself to be angry. And as a result of that, you'll become angry for things that you shouldn't become angry for. That is the nature of the beast. I mentioned Rav Steinman, even Shabbos when he ate, which he ate because there's a mitzvah of owning Shabbos to eat and enjoy the food, he ate it at a minimal level. At a minimal level. Why? Because he understood that if he ate more than he should eat to fulfill the mitzvah of enjoying Shabbos eating-wise, he's going to be inclined to want to eat, and that will actually affect him during the week. So he only ate to the minimum. Whatever Oneg Shabbos was, that's it. Why am I eating? Because it's a mitzvah to eat and enjoy the food on Shabbos. So the food was different than weekday food. The amounts were greater to be more satisfied. But beyond the minimum of being more, did not go beyond that point. Because he understood, going beyond that point, you're already creating a conditioning that you will be interested in having more than you should have. That's what the Rambam saying. anger is not a good thing. You should only get angry with things of great importance. Why? Because if you get angry too often, even things that you should become angry for, you're going to develop a condition called anger. And things are going to set you off, even things that should not set you off. Therefore, only once in a while for great things, only there should you become angry. Should you allow yourself to become angry. The person should only desire, ingestion-wise, food-wise, only things which are necessary for your body, for your health, physically. The efsha lios mezulosam, and you can't live without it. A person, let's say, has a certain iron deficiency, and he's told he should eat red meat once or twice a week, and he enjoys it. Well, that he has to do because he's eating it for that reason. But don't go beyond more than you have to. The Talmud tells us, in the olden days, if a person had high blood pressure, how do you relieve the pressure? Now, this is before the pharmaceuticals. You would go to a bloodletter, and it was called Hakozas Adam, and they were experts, and they would drain all the blood of the body and leave a minimum amount of blood. Okay, and therefore, it's really a very dangerous procedure, because if it's done in an area where the person becomes chilled after this procedure is done, he could die of a pneumonia immediately. Also, he can't exert himself immediately because the system is totally weakened. What does he have to do? The Talmud says he has to eat red meat, broiled red meat, not broiled to a bone, dry, medium rare. So it has the blood, even though the blood has been extracted, but it's red. He should drink red wine, and he should be dressed well, so his body is insulated, not to catch a draft, and not be in a drafty location. And he should rest. And then after a short period of time, the blood will be regenerated. This is how they would relieve the pressure of the body at one time. Otherwise, a person could die of a stroke because of the out of control pressure. When the person felt the pressure, and the person would go, and the Talmud says you should not go more than too often to do this procedure, because otherwise a person could die. Because if you do it too often, it may totally compromise a person's health for that reason. So good, you're permitted to eat red meat. So if you ate the red meat during this time when you had the procedure done, now you're into eating. You go to Chaim's Steakhouse, Clot Kosher, and you have hash brown potatoes with the steak and everything else that goes with it. But you understand that's not where you should be going. You only ate the broiled meat because of your physical condition, not because you ate it for the sake of desire. So he says, therefore, you have to be careful. You have to understand why you're eating, what the objective is. Therefore, it should be the minimum, not once I do it, I do. It's carte blanche. Once I'm permitted, I go beyond that. You don't. King Solomon says in Proverbs, Tzaddik ochel l'sovin nafsho. A tzaddik, when he eats, it's only to save his soul. I eat to live. What's eating to live? As much as I have to eat. That's I don't eat more than that. More than nourishment, which is required nourishment to be healthy, doesn't go there. Of course, King Solomon, the wise man who ever lived, is actually telling you this fact. Because if you live that, if that's your motto of life, I eat to live, only for that reason, you never develop a negative conditioning to be into eating. I remember when Jews started to eat sushi, going back about 30 years ago, they had kosher sushi in New York. I remember I was giving a shit in somebody's office, and somebody got all excited. Did you hear? A new sushi restaurant just came, and they have, when you dip it with the chopsticks or whatever they call the wooden sticks, and you eat it, it's something you can't imagine what it is. And you were talking about it like they won the lottery, this $100 million lottery. It's something you got to go there. You have to have that experience. Instead, if you don't have the experience, you think you'd be less of a person. No, you're missing out on life. You don't know what life's all about. Understand? If you don't go to Aspen skiing, you skied in, upstate New York, you know what Aspen is? You can't imagine. The slopes, the this, the that. Okay. So the guy comes back he breaks his back on that slope. He has a head injury. Okay. You don't know what Aspen is. Do you know what Aspen is? Why do you ski? We need enjoyment. You have to take a break of whatever you need. Do you have to go to Aspen and spend 20 times what it costs to ski upstate? If the reason why you're going to ski is what, for relaxation, there's a lot of ego in it. Then we go on a private jet, and we have our own Sefer Torah, and we bring our own kosher food. And we got Sephardic Jews there and Ashkenazic Jews, and there's a question of camaraderie. There's achdus, unity. This is a mitzvah, As they used to say, tell it to the Marines. You want to delude yourself, you can convince yourself about anything. That's what it is. King Solomon says, Tzaddik ochel l'sov nafsho. A tzaddik only eats to save his soul. That's it. More than that, he doesn't want to even go there. V'chein lo ye'omel be'isko el lahasik dover shetzorach lo l'chaysho. You should only engage in business only to the point that you have sufficient. Nothing more than that. Why? As a human being, as we say, you're whetting my appetite. A person, I remember, one of the people, Yad Avrami, married a girl from Paris. And I went to the wedding. It was Elit Lanner. His wife is from Paris. And I go to the wedding. And then afterwards there, they have every kind of chef. And they had a pastry chef. The pastry chef comes out with his white uniform, with a big white hat. And they wheel in this table of all kinds of pastries. And the sparklers on this table, all kinds of sparklers. You think it's July 4th. I'm not sure when Armistice Day is in Paris, when it is. And everybody stands up and they start clapping. They're applauding the chef, pastry chef. He's bringing in this thing. I never saw anything. The excitement that they brought it in and clapping, it's almost like, it's food worship, worshiping the food. You never saw such a Charlotte Russe. You never saw such a this or that, whatever it is. It's unbelievable what it is. So he explains, you should only earn as much as you need, whatever you need is. Once you earn more, because we're comfort inclined. We all want comfort, more comfort. Person says, I buy a mattress. It costs me $2,000. But they said, do you realize you can get a mattress for $5,000? And when you sleep on that mattress, you think whatever it is, you don't even realize you're sleeping. You're out in a second. But it costs you $10,000. $2,000, any orthopedic surgeon tells you, healthy, no problem. Just get firm. But you realize for another $10,000, you get a mattress. You're somewhere else. You tell me, is it worth the additional $10,000? Or is it part of its ego? I sleep on a $10,000, $15,000 mattress. The average guy doesn't sleep on that kind of mattress. But you're playing into that because I want that, I desire it. You're playing into your physical and ego needs to satisfy that. You keep it lean and mean. You buy, you earn what you can afford. What you can't afford, you don't buy. That's the way it is. Sometimes people say, I could afford it, why not? Give me that expression. I could afford it, why not? But if you don't need it, why are you buying it? Because I can afford it. And how often are you going to use it? But if I can afford it, why not? So what's the answer? So why are you buying it? Put it in the bank. Well, I'm not going to earn that much interest in the bank. If I can afford it, why not? The answer is that's your ego. Because if I can afford it, I buy it. Even if I don't need it. As long as I have a place to put it, I'll buy it. I remember years ago, Barney's had a sale. Barney's sale. I'm not going back 50 years ago. I'm going back maybe 20 years ago. $8,000 suit for $3,500. It's tremendous discount. Marnie's once a year sale. People bought it. The suits they bought in the previous year still had the tags on them. They never took off the tags. So what are you buying this year's? Well, last year's is slightly outdated. This year, this is the in style. And what happens if next year this suit's still going to have the tags on? So you're going to have a collection of your foolish mistakes that you made in the past. It's not a mistake because it satisfied me when I bought it. If I could afford it, why not? For that price, it's worth buying because you never know. What I'm talking about now is reality, the way people behave and the way people make their decisions. No different. I'm not exaggerating as much as an iota because I see it. Lo omel beisko. You should not toil in your earnings. Elo lahasik dova shetzorchel l'chayisho. Ki shnema tov ma'at l'tzadik. Tzadik doesn't need more than a little bit. He does what he needs. More than that, he doesn't get distracted. Lo yikpots yodo v'yoser. You should not be too withholding, even for yourself. Person compromises his health because he doesn't want to spend the money. So he withholds. Like Larry, he's stingy. That's what he is. Stingy guy. He comes to the podiatrist. The man has bunions and calluses and corns, everything under the sun. So the doctor says, I never saw a pair of feet like this. He says, well, you realize Payless had a sale on the shoes. It normally sells for $16. I got it on closeout for $2. But he says, don't you realize how foolish you are? Just look what your feet are, the condition. It's 3 sizes too small and it two widths too narrow. What do you buy those shoes for? But don't you realize what kind of deal I got? $2. They normally sell for $16. But people normally don't buy shoes at Payless unless they have no choice. You can afford a pair of shoes at whatever, $400. What are you buying these shoes for? Got it. That's the foolishness. He doesn't see the forest from the trees. He's too withholding. He's so stingy. He's harmed by this. You shouldn't be squandering your money. Even when you give charity, give only as much as you can afford. Don't go beyond that line. Why? Because the Talmud says you're giving to help a poor man. What happens if you give so much you become impoverished yourself? You're actually undermining your financial base. It's what you're trying to accomplish. It's without thinking. You're inclined just to give. You're a giving person. You should be giving, but not foolish. You're hurting yourself. It's like a person wants to warm himself by a fire. He says, if the fire warms when you're 6 feet away, you can imagine I put my hand in the fire, how warm I'd be. That's called you burning yourself. That's foolishness. I want to help the other man. What does help mean? Help him, but you don't hurt yourself. But if you're doing it in a way where you're hurting yourself, that's called foolishness. You lend appropriately. Who do you lend to? The person who's truly in need of the money. The person has to support his family, and you're able to help him, and you could lend him the money. And you have another person is an alcoholic. He's a drug addict. And you lend him what? To support his condition. Of course, you're doing the right thing by withholding, not lending that man. Or a man, every time you lend him, it's good money after bad money. What are you lending him for? And you understand it. You should only lend it to a person where it has value to lend that person. But if you have this need to give and be good and to be seen by others as you're a giving person, you know what happens? You're going off the cliff. You're not doing the right thing. You got to do your due diligence. Not to the point where actually it's indication you're withholding. But simultaneously, there's a balance. Who am I giving him? Is he a credible borrower? Who knows who he is? Well, he told me a story. He's convincing. How could he be not telling the truth? A man wouldn't have that kind of brazenness to lie to such a degree, As they say, you haven't seen anything yet. That's the reality of people out there. You have a basic obligation to live your life responsibly. That's your obligation. Lo yeh mahulel v'sochek. You should not be like happy-go-lucky. You're always like in a very happy mood. And therefore, as a result of that, you're so immersed in your ecstasy, so to say, in your happiness, you don't come down. Come off cloud nine and, see what's going on. People are happy-go-lucky. And they do things flippantly, being flippant. Why do things flippantly? Because they don't take things, if you'd be more serious, you'd see more clearly. I woke up on this side of the bed. I got a call from my son. I'm having euphoria. When you instead of euphoria, don't make any responsible decisions. Because if you make decisions that you have to be very responsible and very accurate and very focused, you're not focused right now. Because you're experiencing euphoria. It's like a person gets a call from a friend he hadn't spoken to in 40 years. And he was supposed to, his wife told him to take the pot off the stove. He was so into his friend and excited, he forgot the food burnt. They had to call the fire department. His wife says, what happened to you? I was totally distracted. Because if a person is in that mindset, some people personality-wise, that is their predilection. We're not that serious. We walk on air. But it's not a good thing. Because then you're not focused. It's that mindset, that personality is a distracted personality. What about a person who's always melancholy, always depressed? That person who's depressed, you don't see the sun. The sun is already set in this man's life. You don't see the positive side of life to be able to benefit what you could benefit from. Yeah, there's an interesting expression. You should be happy with nachas. What's nachas? Nachas means with normalcy. The word nachas means it's settled, with a settledness. Joy with settledness. You say to a person, you should have nachas from your family. It's nachas. I'm not sure the English translation means you should have tranquility as a result of your children being who they are. It should settle you. You should be in a settled place. But the word vayonach, what the Torah tells us when the Noach built the ark, it says vayonach al har arorot. But the water receded, it rested. It settled on Mount Ararat. Settling. Menucha v'simcha, right? Shabbos. Menucha and simcha. You have settledness and you have joy. They really go hand in hand. Joy doesn't mean that. I once said, what's his name? Dennis Prager once wrote an article. I told somebody once gave me a subscription to his newsletter once a month. And he had an article. Joy and fun. What's the difference between joy and fun? So he writes over there, it's a phenomenal article. Many people are having fun, but they have no joy in their life. And joy, many people have joy, but they have no fun. He says, raising a child and staying up all night when your child, God forbid, has a croup, it's not fun. But when you nurse your child to health, that's joy. And he gives many examples of fun and joy. We're going to go out, we're going to have a lot of fun. Do these people have any joy in their life? They have no joy in their life. Joy is menucha and simcha. If the simcha is based on menucha, because you're settled, you're in a good place, you're settled, That's real. That's called joy. I feel accomplished. And you are accomplished. I feel I've invested my life properly. My focus is right. That person feels satisfied. He's samech v'chelko. What is a samech v'chelko? I'm satisfied with my lot. A person who's satisfied with his lot, that's called joy. That's not called fun. A person who's not satisfied with his lot and he needs distraction. Many people need distraction. Without distraction, they can't survive it. And they're every night, what are we doing? Where are we going? We're staying home just to have a quiet night. What am I supposed to think about? The TV's broken, or I didn't pay my bill. I didn't pay for the television, for that special service. So I'm going to go out of my mind tonight. You mean I got to take tranquilizers? Otherwise, I can't survive the night. What am I supposed to do? You ever hear such a thing? Just have a quiet, because the person is unsettled within himself. If the person would actually be content within himself because of who he is, now we reflect. Maybe I could be a better person. Maybe this, because I'm dealing with something which is substantial within me. A person who's competent and lives responsibly, he's always wants to be more responsible, to build on that level of accomplishment. But a person feels whatever it is, it's a job. I make a lot of money, but who am I? What is my life all about? He's a zero. His kids are disastrous. His marriage is disastrous. He makes a lot of money. So what does he have to show for his life? That there's no check he can't write. He can write that alimony check and pay for his divorce lawyer like nobody could pay for that divorce lawyer. That's what life's all about. So again, but we could have fun. I could buy any wine and we drink ourselves drunk to the point where we'll talk like we were born without brains. But that's fun. But that's not what human beings are all about. So he says, you should be happy all your life with tranquility, with settledness. Save upon yofos, and you always have a smile on your face. Many people, I walk down the street, I used to see, they're like they're empty shells with a smile on their face. Every night they're going to another event. And the quality of the talk, the social scene, it's pitiful. They're smiling. Everybody's playing up to next or telling who they are. Or praising, complimenting a person on the dress, the tie, the drink, the this, the that, or the tombstone. They have tombstones on their desks. They don't realize that's all they have to show for life, those tombstones. Yeah. In Hebrew, we call it a matzeva. You put it on a grave. That's what a tombstone is. But that's what the Rambam says. When you're in that equidistant location, you have joy, benachas, with tranquility, with settledness. You're settled, and you could take 3 steps back and see what you've done, what you've accomplished. You have what to show for your life. Many years ago, used to be, remember Life magazine. It's a big magazine, and it usually had a picture on the front cover. So it had a picture on the cover, an old Jewish grandmother with a kerchief, with a shawl, dressed in like a house dress. She has actually growths on her face. She has wrinkles. And you have a woman who's not far from that age, who had plastic surgery, dressed like a woman 30 years younger than what she is, glamorous, and the bottom caption was, who's happier? This old babachka, or babuchka, whatever you want to call her, or this modern day glamorous woman, who's happier? It's obvious. If you have to be who you're not, who are you trying? You're in competition with a woman 30 years younger than you. What are you trying to show? The answer is because you're not happy where you're at. You can't bring back the past. Not saying you should look like that other woman, but who are you trying to be? You're trying to be somebody other than who you are. And many people try to be somebody other than who they are. And they believe that's who they are. I always used to say, we used to have lectures, and I introduce myself. I say, "Who are you?" So they say, "I'm an attorney." So I used to say, I didn't ask you what you do. Who are you? The answer is people actually mix it up because they invest so much in being that attorney. They spend the hours there to make partner and forget about their families. That's who they are. They are the attorney. Tax season, I don't see my family for 3 months. And he is a partner in a CPA firm, accounting firm. The big six, So that's who you are. But who are you? People, the truth is, they don't know who they are. If every aspect of their life is invested in being that, whatever it is, the professional, to earn the money, to be able to provide all the comforts of life. But what about who are you? Is that who you're supposed to be? To generate dollars to provide comforts? You missed the boat. Every one of our inclinations, our predilections, we should always be at that point. Recorded many years ago. I'm going back maybe 30 years ago, 35 years ago. The Vatican lent their collection of Jewish books and Jewish manuscripts, and it was displayed at the New York Public Library on 42nd Street. I don't know if you remember. And they had an exhibition. They showed it. 3 floors or 2 floors of New York Public Library had the first printing of many Hebrew books. They even had manuscripts, Rambam's writings, manuscripts, well, before the printing press. This was all the booty they took when they destroyed during the Crusades, the Jewish communities in Eastern Europe. They gathered all this, and they brought it to the Vatican. That's where they got all these books from, and every other where they have such a collection of Hebrew books. And it said in the printings, various places in Europe, that's where they were published, printed. So I remember I went through, and you bought like a book, which it had there, like you go to an auction, it show you book what's being displayed for auction. So this was an auction just to be observed. You bought a book, and it told you what's being displayed. If you wanted to see it, you would go to that location and see what it was, the manuscript, the printing, the this, whatever it is. You weren't permitted to touch it, couldn't touch it. So I remember there was something displayed there. They had a picture of a man naked, and his arms were stretched out and his legs were spread standing, and his head was straight, and they had circles, red circles, in the middle of the chest, under the arm, like various pressure points, different that. And it said Kabbalistic, because it has to do with Kabbalistic, where the energy field has to do with the person, different parts of the person's body, the energy fields. And the one who put it out, I remember his name was Gold. He put out this manual describing what's on display. And I take a look at the manual, and I could read the Hebrew. You know what it was? It was a bloodletting chart. Had nothing to do with Kabbalistic, nothing to do with it. If you want to let blood for this ailment, you let blood from here. Under the arm, in the chest, in the groin, and this. That's what it was about. But this person who knew nothing, it resembled a Kabbalistic chart, the energy field of a human being. You understand? But it was really blood. Some responding to Larry for various ailments, they would let blood from certain parts of the body to address certain issues. There was a thing called, people used to use leeches. They put leeches on people's, what was leeches? It was a similar concept to bloodletting. Because the leech, they put on someone leeches, it would draw blood, and that would alleviate the pressure of certain parts of the body. Inflammation, whatever it was. That was the concept. This, what we're talking about, is the path of the wise men. People are chachamim, wise men. Kol adam shidei osav deis beinis mutzos nikra chacham. You this? Who deserves the classification of Chochem? A wise man, where everything in your life is balanced. If you're off balance, you're not wise. Because what is a wise man? A person has wisdom. Wisdom has to do with intellect. But if the intellect is compromised due to your inclination, you're not wise. But a person that's balanced exactly regarding all his predilections, he's in the middle, now you're able to employ your wisdom. And because you're able to, therefore you deserve that quantification, now you're chochem. You're wise. Otherwise, not wise. Nobody is wise as you are. We're not infallible to mistakes. We makes, but still. But the wise man, he recognizes his mistake. The one who's not wise doesn't recognize a mistake because he's always blinded by his ego or by those inclinations which are off balance. That's the reason. And that's why King Solomon says in Mishlei, rebuke a wise man and he will love you. Rebuke a deprecator, he will hate you. The deprecator doesn't want to hear about it. Rabbi, I've heard enough. I don't want to hear about it. The wise man is wise. He's wise. He understands he's not perfect. So he's always willing to hear if he didn't meet the grade. And therefore he will love you when you tell him where he's off. So now he's going to make that correction. Because each person is looking for something else. The wise man's looking to be better. The deprecator is looking for what he's looking for. If anything which is contrary to who he wants to be or what he believes to have value, he doesn't want to hear about it. Therefore, he will hate you. And that you find they can't take criticism. The moment I used to sometimes disagree with somebody. Somebody said it. I said it. I think you can see it. Why are you arguing with me? I said, I'm not arguing. Am I arguing? I'm presenting another way to see it. No, you're arguing. The answer is because since they're so fixed on only the way they see it, they have no capacity to see it differently. Therefore, I'm arguing with them. I'm fighting with them. But that's the deprecator. He doesn't want to hear about it. Because the moment he hears it's not like him, you're actually rattling his cage. He doesn't want his cage to be rattled. When you go over the bridge, the Washington Bridge, Georgia, all of a sudden sometimes you feel vibrations because there's a certain sway in every bridge. Why are you rattling my cage? Oh, it's the bridge. It's not, I'm not rattling your cage. Okay. Don't cross the bridge if you don't want to be rattled.